Yo yo yo, guys girls, we are back yet with another Warhammer WesHammer video. As I said in the previous video, I really wanted to learn about Trazyn, and I wanted to learn more about his trolling. And because it was so easily digestible by Mr. WesHammer, I decided to go for his video. As always, original video is linked in the description. Please leave original video a like. Grab your drinks, your snacks, and let's begin.
Every single character in 40k has a dedicated fan base on one side, and an even more dedicated group of haters on the other.
You know what? I know, immediate pause. I've seen some other people like reacting, and I realized I'm probably like maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I'm the only one who really likes Swargar. Everyone is like just mean to him.
No matter who you bring up in a comment section, you're gonna get people who say that they're the best thing ever, and another group of people that thinks they're the avatar of mediocrity. Except, of course, if you're talking about Trazyn the Infinite.
Yeah, this guy is like beloved by everyone.
Somehow the galaxy's biggest troll is also Warhammer 40k's least contentious character. Sentiment on the whole with this guy seems to be overwhelmingly positive. And it makes sense. He's an eccentric collector determined to preserve the universe's history.
Brother, I am pinned here.
By liberating artifacts of impossible worth from lesser species that can't appreciate them like he does. Here's what happens when you take Indiana Jones, Marvel's The Collector, and Ash Ketchum, merge them all into one, and download their consciousness into an 8-foot-tall, 65-million-year-old metal skeleton. His antics are
how much 8 foot is in meters?
Hilarious, admirable, and admittedly, a little bit disturbing. But who exactly is he, and where did he come from? What is he all about? Well, today we're gonna get to the bottom of that, and learn all about 40k's most beloved
Sec, I have to check. Am I recording? I am.
character. But first, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, and then we're gonna dive headfirst into the Grimdark.
Okay.
A lot of you in the comments have been asking me where I get these super dope t-shirts from. They come from this really cool company called Into the AM, and they're the sponsor of this week's video. Not only are their designs super unique and colorful, but they're also crazy comfortable too. They feel thicker than a normal t-shirt.
I actually like the design.
And they're crazy soft. I've been wearing their shirts for about 6 months now, and so far, even after having run them through the wash multiple times, there's been no shrinkage and the colors haven't faded at all.
Oh.
My absolute favorite part about them is that they're actually longer than a normal t-shirt. And as a guy with a big chest and a long torso, I super appreciate that. I can't tell you how many times I've had a shirt that I really like, but after a couple of times through the wash, it ends up shrinking, and then every single time I lift my arms up, it just comes up past my belly button. So does Into the AM shirts pass the West test?
West test. It does.
Perfection. Not only do they look amazing and are super comfortable, but they're actually really affordable too.
Do you know what's also
If you're
crazy?
like me and you're a fan of really cool graphic tees, you can get 3 of them bundled together for $60. But if you like something a little bit more professional looking, you can get 3 of their basic tees bundled together for $49.95, which is a
I wanted to say, this is really off topic. I have a friend who is like exact copy of WesHammer. It's so trippy.
great deal on its own, but if you use my link down in the description of this video, or use code WesHammer at checkout, you can save an additional 10% off your entire order. Into the AM is running a massive Cyber Week sale right now, with discounts from 30 to 80% off site-wide that stack with my discount code, so you can save even more money on some amazing shirts. So go to intotheam.com/WesHammer today, and pick yourself out something awesome. Thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring today's video, and with that out of the way, let's get into the Grimdark.
I actually hope those guys ship to Europe. I kind of like them. I might try to buy something.
The war-torn galaxy of the 41st millennium always seems to be one step removed from utter and total annihilation. The squabbling of its various species and the influence of the dark gods constantly poised to burn away everything that ever was. In such an event, new species will inevitably rise from the ashes of what came before. They will be inheriting a galaxy that bore witness to the impossible, countless marvels, terrors, and an infinite number of stories great and small. They will, however, be ignorant of all of this, and will be doomed to repeat the mistakes of their forebears. That is, unless a certain metallic kleptomaniac named Trazyn is able to succeed in his lofty mission. You see, Trazyn is the self-described archivist of the Solemnist Galleries.
So he's an archaeologist.
And his ultimate goal is to preserve the history of the Milky Way. He believes there will come a time when the lesser species will inevitably destroy themselves, and that his ultimate mission is to preserve what was for whatever comes after. Whether that be the Necron dynasties themselves, or whatever new species climbs its way out of the primordial ooze. Even though he's an incredibly powerful and influential Necron lord,
I'm getting like British Museum vibes.
that controls legions of his own soldiers, he's more of a researcher and a historian than a conqueror. When him and his legions march to war, it's not necessarily out of the desire for conquest, but more as a byproduct of the necessities in procuring some of the more well-guarded relics he has set his eyes on. He's a rather complicated individual and stands apart from most of 40k's characters of similar importance, especially when compared to the other Necron lords, who seem to be more fixated in taking back the galaxy from all of these newfound squatters that have shown up since they went to sleep. When it comes to Trazyn, we can respect his pursuits as a noble cause.
I kind of like it. He's so different from, well, I know only like the Silent King and then there's Imhotep the Destroyer, and like we're so opposite. I think Silent King wants to undo the bio thingy, and the Destroyer embraced it. And this guy has his own goal. He's like that's what makes him interesting to me.
It's important to preserve history, but at the same time, he's also a little bit of a kleptomaniac, basically just showing up to take whatever the hell he wants under the guise of some kind of noble mission. He doesn't like to use the word steal. He doesn't steal anything. He liberates relics of antiquity, something that previous owners don't ever really seem to appreciate. His antics have gotten him banned from numerous Necron worlds, and he has very few contacts left that wouldn't immediately kill him on sight. Trazyn has lost count of how many times the other Necron lords have sent assassins after him, and unfortunately for them, through his remarkable cunning and the use of countless surrogate bodies, he never really stays destroyed for very long. The act of being murdered proving to be little more than a minor annoyance. The success of his mission is paramount, and he justifies his actions by claiming if he was able to find some way to explain himself to the lesser species, they would certainly come to understand the importance of what he was trying to do. But how would he even go about doing this? How do you explain to humanity and other species like them that their lifespans are so finite that to an immortal being like Trazyn, the purpose of their existence basically boils down to a handful of artifacts or important individuals?
Guys, what if we are already trapped in Trazyn's museum and we don't know it?
They should be willingly giving them up instead of selfishly clutching onto them. To him, trying to explain himself to such barbaric individuals is unfortunately a pointless waste of time that could be better spent acquiring even more important pieces of history. So he takes what he wants and moves on to his next pursuit, making a whole lot of enemies along the way. Trazyn's enemies see him as a monster, a tyrant come to unleash not just legions of Necron soldiers, but also a bizarre menagerie of monsters and aliens, sometimes even their own soldiers that have been mind-shackled to him. Trazyn's heard what they call him: a thief, a monster, an abomination, a tyrant, and thousands of other hurtful names. And he understands why they would fling such unwarranted insults at him. I mean, really, he gets it. But from his perspective, he's the most altruistic person in the entire galaxy. It's just unfortunate that everyone else is too primitive to understand that. The relics that Trazyn has stored in his galleries are inconceivable.
Yeah, I hope WesHammer is gonna tell what he has.
From ancient weaponry thought lost millions of years ago during the War in Heaven, to entire regiments of guardsmen and space marines, locked in stasis for all time. And speaking of those galleries, to understand Trazyn, we need
Is that a Thunder Warrior?
to understand the world that he calls home, the world of solemnness. The things that Trazyn has taken and stored in his galleries are inconceivable. From ancient weaponry thought lost millions of years ago during the War in Heaven, to entire regiments of guardsmen and space marines, locked in stasis for all time. And speaking of those galleries, we need to talk about the world that Trazyn calls home. As we've established, Trazyn is a particularly eccentric individual, so we should expect no less from his kingdom. For a long time, we didn't really know too much about it, other than it was the place where Trazyn stored his vast collection. But with Book 2 of the Fabius Bile trilogy, we finally got a decent look at this place. So first and foremost, even though I'm going to refer to it as a planet from time to time, Solemnness really isn't a planet. It's an artificial construct, the world's atmosphere consisting of lashing winds and toxic clouds, but for the most part seems as though it's left completely defenseless, almost as if despite being a cold, dead husk, is welcoming to visitors.
Yeah, I had this thought. Maybe he wants people to visit it.
If one was to descend to the planet's surface, they would see nothing but silvery sand dunes stretched out as far as the eye could see. There are no ruins, vegetation, or any signs of life at all. If you were to pick up a handful of the sand and let it dribble through your fingers, you would notice that it's not sand at all. Each individual speck is a micro machine, so tiny that as they fell through your fingers, the wind would catch them and carry them off to a new destination. When Fabius Bile did this, he could have sworn he saw a skeletal face leering back at him in the cloud of nanomachines, almost as if whoever made this place had a pretty interesting sense of humor. The machines act as trillions of minuscule solar cells, receiving transferred energy from a massively powerful star the entire world is formed around. And the toxic gases and winds are a byproduct of the tiny machine's synthetic photosynthesis. It's an impossible place that, even to a great and terrible mind like the one owned by Fabius Bile, makes absolutely no sense. Its technology is just on a completely different scale. When Fabius Bile journeyed to this world...
Dude, I'm sorry if I'm not commenting enough. I'm just absorbing this. This is crazy. I thought it's simply just a land and it has like a big building and you enter it.
Him and his followers were trying to figure out how to get inside of it. They had worked out a system where if they used their ship's signal jammers, they might be able to interfere with the nanomachines. But before they could put their plan into action, the nanomachines directly beneath their feet all hardened together into a large circular platform. The platform then began to descend downwards, creating a massive tunnel through the dunes. Once they finally broke free from the undulating mass of nanomachines, what they saw was pretty spectacular. And I'm going to read a passage from the book that describes exactly what they were seeing. Fabius looked around in growing wonder. Jade lumens flickered to life across the vast space that they now found themselves in. In the emerald radiance, Fabius saw that their platform was one among hundreds, each set equidistant from the others and at varying heights, mounted atop deceptively thin towers of smooth stone and featureless metal. Instinctively, he activated the armor's augers, trying to get a sensor map of his surroundings. Each of the platforms was connected by a single walkway to the edge of an immense circular tier. There were thousands of tiers, each rising to impossible heights and descending to imperceptible depths, all along the vertical curve of what could only be a colossal sphere.
God damn, it's just, think of the scale of how much, it's probably like not even like half of the museum.
The tiers was occupied by what appeared to be a labyrinth of prismatic galleries, winding back into the heart of the vast structure. And all were slowly, almost imperceptibly, moving, rotating, the way a world might rotate in its place in the firmament. He murmured in awe despite himself. Questions sped across the surface of his mind, one after the next. This place was nothing so much as a gargantuan orrery built around a caged power source of incalculable potency.
I was right,
he said, thumping the ramp of the gunship with the ferrule of his scepter. The sound echoed loudly in the silence.
It's a Dyson sphere. I would guess that it has been here for some time, longer than humanity has prowled the stars. In certain Eldari text, it speaks of a great war in heaven. Most of it is allegorical nonsense, as can be expected of such a culture. But if you were to compare it to other Xenos records, there are hints. Star gods and cannibal suns, warp spawn and soulless legions that were more monstrous than any abominable intelligence. Machines that devoured entire worlds for fuel.
Wait, so at this time, does he know about Necrons, or it was like even before they awoken?
And vampiric entities that drained the energy from stars. Cannons that could split reality with a single shot.
Fabius smiled.
A war that laid waste to every galaxy in the universe. A war our existence has yet to recover from. Glorious to think of it, isn't it?
Palos grunted.
If it's the truth. What is truth but the perception of fact?
The fabled prismatic galleries of Solemnus are packed full of some of the galaxy's most valuable and historically relevant artifacts from across space and time. However, it doesn't contain just physical objects. but potentially billions of living individuals as well. Whether they be figures of historical importance or entire battles, each participant frozen in time and snatched away to be stored in Trazyn's mighty collection. He likes to walk amongst his exhibits, ducking underneath bolter shells frozen in the air, and making minor adjustments to cloaks billowing in the wind, moving soldiers around ever so slightly to truly capture the emotional impact of a battle. He's not just a history nerd, but also fancies himself a great storyteller, making sure his exhibits don't just tell the historical facts, but also tell a great story and capture the emotion of the battle.
So he basically makes battle better.
Unfortunately, sometimes these ideas can conflict with one another, and he has to make concessions. If, say, for example, a soldier of historical importance is in the collection, and he's trying to represent their last stand, if the captured individual is missing an arm, but the moment he's trying to depict happened before he lost the limb, Trazyn has no problem with taking an arm from another less important specimen and reattaching it to them to better capture the moment. Maybe his exhibit is supposed to feature 1,000 guardsmen fighting off against a horde of orcs, but he was only able to capture 500 of them. In this case, he may grab another 500 from a different gallery to fill out the ranks, even if those soldiers came from a completely different planet and time period. He may even grab some historically inaccurate outfits for the implanted guardsmen, if it matches the original exhibit, balancing historical accuracy, limited supplies, and a good story, all of which can prove to be a pretty difficult task, but it's one that he is wholly dedicated to. And when you love what you do, it never really feels like work. Some of his treasures include an ossified husk of an enslaver.
What the fuck is even that? That's like a big balloon.
And the fabled Wraithbone Choir of the Altanzar craft world. The preserved head of the Ecclesiarch Sebastian Thor, who took over after Vandire's reign of blood. A library of written documents, said to be so vast it rivals even the fabled Black Library of the Eldari. The world spirit of an Exodite Eldar planet. Regiments from just about every different Astra Militarum world. Artifacts from the Necron tier's ancient past during the times of flesh. Astartes from various different chapters and legions, many of those individuals predating the Horus Heresy. An entire Tyranid splinter fleet, which we'll get into a little bit later. A preserved and possibly still alive Krork.
Right, imagine. But I think if he were to release this Quark, I think he would get dumb really quickly, I think.
With
Well, not in my timeline, of course, but maybe like in like 500 Warhammer years, he would be stupid.
Impossibly advanced armor, an intact Catan shard, a damaged but still functioning webway portal, a troop of Harlequins, and a massive stock of uncorrupted Emperor's Children gene seed. Although admittedly, he ended up trading this away to Fabius Bile for something far more unique. A perfect clone of the Primarch Fulgrim.
Okay, so I want to take a second to really highlight that one. A perfect, uncorrupted clone of the Primarch Fulgrim, complete with all of his memories and previous honor intact.
Wait, but how did he even get a copy of Fulgrim?
From before he was corrupted by Slaanesh. This is possibly one of the biggest additions to the lore in the last 5 years.
This actually would be so crazy if this loyal Fulgrim would return and fight the corrupted Fulgrim. That's crazy.
And could be the beginning of one of 40K's most memorable storylines. The redemption of Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children. Can you
That actually would be so sick. God, that would be cool.
imagine what it would look like if out of all of the Primarchs to return next, it was Fulgrim as a loyalist? What implications could this have for the future of mankind? What would it look like if Fulgrim returned to stand beside Guilliman and lead the Imperium against...
Yeah, how would Guilliman, and from what I heard, Lion is also back. How would they react? Dude, it opens so many possibilities. Damn.
chaos? What would it mean for the Emperor's children that followed him? The implications are massive, to say the least. But that being said, if I know anything about Trazyn, it's that he isn't going to just give away a mint condition 2nd edition collectible. So we're probably never going to find out. The larger his collection grows, the more ambitious Trazyn becomes, often setting up displays for future acquisitions. Now, one particular exhibit of note is a resplendent golden throne room, waiting for the day when he manages to obtain the centerpiece of his human exhibit and the crown jewel of his entire collection. Now, how he's going to manage to break into the Imperial Palace...
He he kidnapped the
To
emperor.
steal the Emperor of Mankind is something that, admittedly, he hasn't quite worked out the details on. But he's working on it. It seems like out of all of the marvelous oddities and antiques that Trazyn has managed to collect, the one thing he hasn't been able to obtain is a friend. Oh, wait, no, never mind. He captured one of those too. In the short story, The War in the Museum, Trazyn is attempting to catalog a splinter hive fleet that he managed to capture. One of the specimens in the collection, a lictor, manages to escape and starts rampaging through his galleries. Trazyn inevitably tried to capture it himself after his lich guard proved to be ineffective, resulting in the lictor getting the jump on him and ripping his head off. After he wakes up in a new body, he decides that it might be for the best if he gets another expert to help him handle the situation. So he goes to one of his exhibits on the Adeptus Mechanicus and releases a Magos Biologus from stasis. Trazyn greets him like he would an old friend. The Magos requests that next time Trazyn puts him in stasis that he leave him conscious, and Trazyn tells him that that's a really bad idea. He would definitely go insane not being able to move for 100 years. The Magos rebuttals this, informing him that the amount he could accomplish in silent contemplation for a century would be worth it. The story doesn't really specify much about their relationship, but they greet each other like old colleagues, each wholly driven by the pursuit of knowledge. The Magos specializes in Tyranid organisms, and apparently they've worked out some form of deal where everything that he learns through his dissections, Trazyn will package and send back to the Mechanicus.
Oh, dude, this Mechanicus guy is, damn, he worked out a deal.
In
Okay.
exchange for him staying here on Solemnus. Over the course of the story, the Hive Tyrant that Trazyn was attempting to dehydrate and place at the center of the exhibit pulses out its synaptic link and starts to awaken all of the other Tyranids, something the Magos had specifically warned him about. And trying to put a living Hive Tyrant on display was, to put it mildly, a really stupid idea. A notion that
I think, it might seem that Magus is a lot smarter than Trazyn, but I think Trazyn doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him that much, He doesn't care about inconvenience, kinda a boss. Real boss shit.
Trazyn quickly dismissed. There's a really interesting scene in the book where we get to see what it's like inside of some of his exhibits. Trazyn and the unnamed Magos, as well as a pair of Sisters of Battle that have been mind-shackled to him, end up on a command barge and are sailing across the exhibits as all of the Tyranids start to wake back up. Each of the galleries underneath them is enormous, and if you didn't know what you were actually looking at, they would each look like a different war-torn battlefield from across the galaxy, with the exception that at each of their borders was a half-mile-tall steel wall that separated all of them. When the command barge flies above them, we get to see that each one is a completely different exhibit with a totally different setting. One being a bombarded cityscape, while another is a frozen tundra.
Oh, wow.
As he flies higher into the air, we can see that there are countless other walled-off exhibits just like these. As the Tyranids begin to rampage through the other galleries, the skimmercraft approaches a giant cylindrical tower. It's described as a giant library, multiple rectangular-shaped shelves, each containing a different display. One has a group of guardsmen fighting off against the orcs, while another depicts a clash between space marines of the Horus Heresy era. Every now and then, 40k can get a little bit meta, and this tower sounds an awful lot like
like his room. WesHammer is
many
Trazyn.
of the display cases some serious Warhammer collectors may have in their own homes. I personally have one myself in the studio where I record all of my videos, but I imagine Trazyn's collection is a lot more impressive. Despite having spent his life as a historian and not as a warrior, Trazyn is no slouch in combat. Like all Necrons, he is gifted with the living metal body of Necrodermis that is able to repair itself from practically any injury. If his body does receive catastrophic damage that is too much to be repaired, he can immediately transfer his consciousness into a surrogate, whether that surrogate be nearby or all the way across the galaxy. If he needs to stay wherever he's at, he can also transfer his consciousness to pretty much any other Necron under his control, allowing him to jump back and forth between different Necron bodies.
But I just am curious, how does this work? So let's say he transfers his conscience, I can't pronounce it, sorry, to another Necron. But when the other Necron is like simple, he doesn't. All the simple Necrons, we don't have like shoulder pads, we don't have like a lot of those symbols. Do they transform also physically because his conscience is in the new Necron, or how does it work?
Escaping death each and every jump. His weapon of choice is a staff known as the Empathic Obliterator.
said to contain technology designed by the Old Ones themselves. It has an inbuilt resurrection orb and fires beams of psionic energy. The technology at Trazyn's disposal is frankly remarkable. He's able to open dimensional pockets to move great distances in the blink of an eye, and with the wave of his hand can emit a stasis field that, at one point in the Infinite and the Divine, stops a 6-ton stone hammer that was about to destroy him, locking it in place with a flick of his wrist. He didn't even stop walking to take a second to look at it, waving it off like one would a fly. Possibly his most iconic weaponry is a combination of inventions known as Tesseract Labyrinths and Mind Shackle Scarabs. The Mind Shackles are basically a tiny specialized version of the Canoptic Scarabs that the Necrons use to control other alien species.
I also don't really understand the scarabs. Well, in games, usually these guys build and maintain everything, but why do we have scarabs for also robotics? Because as I understand, the Necrons went through the biotransference thingy. They got stripped of their flesh, they lost their soul, but they gained this like body. So are scarabs also considered Necrons? Did they also put scarabs in the bio thingy? Why are they? Or they? I don't get this part.
Once unleashed, the scarabs will burrow themselves into the victim's head and interfere with their cerebral functions. They aren't always activated right away. In fact, one of their primary uses is to stay dormant for years at a time before receiving a signal from the scarab's commander to activate. On one hand, the victim could become a full-blown sleeper agent, or it might be a lot more subtle. The scarabs may just insert an idea here or there to slowly begin to manipulate the target into taking courses of action that will be beneficial to the Necrons. In more extreme examples, they can completely control the victim. It makes them into a puppet that can be turned into attacking their own comrades, surrendering important information, or even just killing themselves. Cranking up the control like this has its drawbacks and can cause the tiny scarabs to overload after only a few minutes. Trazyn tends to not utilize them in this way. Most of the examples we have of him mind-shackling humans show that he only makes it so they can't attack him, choosing to instead engage in dialogue and strike.
So Trazyn, he controls him here, so tries not to like use them that much. So does that mean like if you're like a regular Imperial Guardsman and you're fighting the other Necron dynasties, do they like literally also use those things to control? That's fucking scary. I thought getting obliterated in 1 second is bad enough, but they also can control it. That's scary.
A bargain. He'd rather make them into allies of convenience rather than just outright dominating their minds. Besides, he finds that his captives tend to fight back against his enemies just fine if he deploys them into an immediately dangerous situation. The second device that he uses is what is known as a Tesseract Labyrinth. They take the form of a small glowing cube, about the size of a human fist. But the reality is that they contain within them a pocket dimension, a prison with which the Necrons can store anything from a single person to an entire army. These are the devices that the Necrons use to store intact Catan shards, which are incredibly powerful when deployed into battle. Wherever Trazyn goes, he brings an entire collection of these things with him, each one containing a different monster or regiment of soldiers.
So he's always like ready to unleash them in even if it need to be.
So at any given time, he's basically walking around with an entire army that he can deploy out of nowhere.
Yeah.
This is why everybody jokes that he's the ultimate Pokemon master. Even though he's incredibly powerful, Trazyn does have his weaknesses. He tends to get hyperfixated on things he finds interesting. And as somebody with the ADHD, I can totally relate to that.
I actually also can relate to that.
When this happens, his circumspection protocols tend to be diminished. And when it comes to warp sorcery in particular, it is said that he is like a deaf man at the dinner table, able to make out words through dampened sounds and lip reading, but not able to even notice the voices of any participants he's not directly focused on. As I mentioned before, he's not really a warrior at heart. He's a man of science and history, but you wouldn't exactly know that by watching him fight. There's a pretty great example of this in The Infinite and the Divine, where at one point Trazyn and Orokin come face to face and end up locked in combat. Both participants move so quickly that their bodies appear as metallic blurs that are impossible for unaugmented human eyes to track. Their machine minds processing information at lightning speed. Orokin is able to glimpse into the future and examines a million different possible destinies to determine the specific microsecond he needs to swing to deliver a killing blow. Well, simultaneously, Trazyn's mind will jump to a new body the second Orikan's blade impacts him. And in the exact same second, the new surrogate body is already charging back into his foe, a blow aimed at his head. This battle seems absolutely insane, but the narrator of the story takes a second to remind us of something very important. He basically says, listen, what you're hearing described is definitely remarkable. The fight of the millennia. Two superhuman individuals buffed to obscene levels by ancient technology and techno-sorcery. But bear in mind that if this had been the time of flesh, this battle would be an unbelievable embarrassment. We as the audience are basically watching two metallic gods clash with one another, but the narrator is here to remind us that the reality of this situation is it's basically just two angry old men hitting each other with their canes.
But frankly, I don't give a damn. And I'll tell you this, only one of us is gonna walk out of here alive.
Bring it on!
I fucking love this book so much. I also really don't want to spoil it for you, so if you like Trazyn, if you like the Necrons, definitely check it out. Like with most Necron characters, their individual histories during the times of flesh are mostly lost to time. We're only ever given brief glimpses into who they used to be through fractured and distorted memory code. It's pretty common for Necrons to wake up with their minds in complete shambles, some being so far gone that they can't awaken at all. So that being said, most of these glimpses we get into their past are not inherently trustworthy. Trazyn ruminates on the fact that he can't remember what he used to look like. Every now and then his mechanical mind
That's actually so sad.
reconstructs an image, or at least what he believes to be an image for about a microsecond. These are images of things he saw during those times, looking down at his curved fingers around a stylist, or dark pupils staring back at him from a burnished mirror. As soon as his mind tries to focus on it, it's gone. The memories of the war in heaven, though, are a bit clearer. He remembers the titanic clashes, armies of metal marching with dire purpose into the fracturing lines of the reptilian Old Ones. We know that in life he was the archaeovist of the Nihilik dynasty, and was a prominent member in their courts. Even all the way back then, he had a deep-seated rivalry with Orikan. One, a master historian who sought to learn the secrets of the past, and the other, a chronomancer, who sought to divine the future. They were polar opposites and contentious rivals.
Now, we're not given an exact time frame on when exactly he emerged from stasis. The original theory that was popular amongst Necron fans was that after the war in heaven, Trazyn simply never went to sleep. But in the infinite
That would make sense if he like has everything of those times in his museum.
in the divine, it tells us that he simply woke up earlier, operating Solomon's alone at
Yeah, but earlier, so elders have been around for like 60 million years. So how earlier?
first, and then with a skeleton crew of cryptex that he had forced out of stasis one by one. At one point, Trazyn claimed that he had been active around the time of the Great Crusade, which would place his time of awakening at least 12,000 years ago. Now, he certainly could be lying about this fact, but considering that he has numerous relics from around this time period, it would lead credence to his claim, meaning that my man has been lurking in the shadows off-screen.
Sorry, I felt a sinister presence outside my window.
Snatching up relics and peoples he finds interesting for a very long time. Now, most recently, 40K's Mad Collector actually assisted the Imperium in defending Cadia against the 13th Black Crusade. Sorta.
In the 41st millennium, Trazyn's expeditions take him all the way across the galaxy, and have seen him take part in many of 40K's most important events. For example, Trazyn was one of the first to know of the coming 13th Black Crusade. This was due to one of the artifacts in his gallery, the Bell of St. Cristal, suddenly ringing out of nowhere after having laid silent for millennia, each and every toll sending out waves of crippling destruction through his exhibits. After the 13th chime, it suddenly fell silent, and Trazyn pondered what it could all mean, and what he should do with the relic, because he feared that it may go off again in the future without warning. And also, possibly to vent a little bit of his frustration, Trazyn took the bell and hurled it into the webway, where he hoped
Yeah, this thing.
it would annoy the Eldar as much as it had him. He's kinda petty like that. Determined to find answers, Trazyn would journey to the crown world of the Oroscar dynasty, Thanatos, home of the Celestial Orrery, a holographic map of the entire galaxy, and one of the most powerful artifacts in existence. These guys weren't too happy to see him, as Trazyn's pursuit of ancient relics is not just limited to non-Necron factions. Apparently they struck a deal, because he was permitted audience with the Orrery. When he viewed the galaxy represented in holographic form, he noticed a crimson-red reflection growing underneath it. He managed to track the source of the corruption to the Eye of Terror, and a world he had never personally ventured to known as Cadia. He didn't really see much value to this place, but figured on one hand he may be able to go there and play the role of its savior, and on the other, if he got bored, there might be some fun trinkets for him to collect. He eventually made his way to the planet and ended up meeting with Belisarius Cawl, who was attempting to understand the nexus of Blackstone beneath Cadia. When Trazyn appeared before him, Cawl almost cut him down on sight. He was a Xenos abomination, a living machine that was blasphemous to the Omnissiah. Trazyn informed him that if he killed him, he would just awaken somewhere else, so it didn't really matter. But he may be able to help him understand the Matrix. Chaos destroying the galaxy, and more importantly, all of its artifacts, was definitely something that would interfere with his ultimate goals. It was an uneasy partnership to say the least. Cawl expected Trazyn to stab him in the back as soon as he had the opportunity, and if he was being honest with himself, Trazyn didn't exactly know whether or not he would do that himself. He mostly came here out of curiosity and boredom. Under Trazyn's instructions, Cawl interfaced with the Nexus, trying to get it to activate, while Trazyn ended up holding off against the Despoiler and his legion of Chaos Space Marines.
Oh, he did it a lot? Well, with his Pokeballs, obviously.
He did this by deploying one of the Tesseract Bolts, which contained an entire army of Imperial warriors, each one plucked from across time. There were Space Marines that, from their perspective only mere moments ago, were in the middle of the Horus Heresy, while some of the Guard regiments and Dreadnoughts had only been added to the collection within recent years. There was a lone Custodian warrior and an entire regiment of the Vostroyan Firstborn. Apparently, even the famous Inquisitor Katarina Greyfax had been in his collection as well. Needless to say, many of these warriors were incredibly confused by the sudden change of scenery, and many more were suffering the effects of stasis sickness. But when you awaken to the sound of bolter fire and charging Chaos Space Marines, the Imperium tends to reorganize and snap into battle formations pretty quickly. It was around this point that Trazyn decided that the hero life wasn't exactly his thing, so he left the fighting to the surprise reinforcements. So what did Trazyn do during the rest of his stay on the war-torn planet of Cadia? Did he present himself as a savior figure to the other Imperial fighters? Was he instrumental in pushing back chaos?
I think he escaped to the shadows.
Did he even make an attempt to save this world? Nah, he saw the writing on the wall, that the battle was lost and he had grown bored of being a hero anyways. So he lurked in the shadows, looking for some kind of prize to take home with him. There were so many choices, so much history was being written this day, and he only had one empty Tesseract labyrinth with him. His prize would eventually come in the form of Castellan Creed, the supreme commander of Cadia's military forces, who had decided to stay behind and die with dignity. Determined to make one last effort and take a few traitors down with him, Trazyn found him bleeding out in the swirling dust and told him this need not be your end. Eternity awaits, before trapping him in the labyrinth. He then teleported back.
That's kind of sad for the poor soul.
Back to his world with his prize in tow. Trazyn wasn't really sure if he was a hero or a thief, even though he had been called the latter hundreds of times in the past. In the act of liberating the Supreme Commander and technically saving his life, he had somehow found a way to be both. The fact that Cadia was ultimately destroyed, and the Eye of Terror would end up spreading its influence across the galaxy, to him was little more than an unnecessary footnote on a great story.
Yeah.
It's really no surprise that Trazyn is such a beloved character. He's hilarious, compelling, super mysterious, and his stories cover a pretty wide range of emotions. We love laughing at his crazy antics and
What did he have in his hands?
general dickishness that tends to run in stark contrast to the super serious tone of 40K. But there's also a deep sadness with Trazyn. For the most part, he's completely alone, a being out of time, who's driven forward only by his mission. It's crazy to think that before 5th edition 40K, the Necrons really didn't have a personality other than kill all humans. And the even crazier thing is that we owe his creation to one of the most contentious literary figures in all of Warhammer. I'm talking about Matt Ward, the author of the Necrons 5th edition Codex. Now, I'm not gonna do a whole thing on him here because honestly, that's a video in its own right. But if you're not familiar with him, just know that he made a lot of changes to the lore that old school Warhammer fans absolutely hated. And whether
But in the end, did it make it better or not?
right or wrong, they tend to blame him for pretty much all of 40K's problems. Now, I would never dare to attempt to speak for the entire community, so I can only speak for myself here. But Mr. Ward, if you're watching this video, I just want you to know that I forgive you for all of the Ultramarines and Grey Knights nonsense. What you
Oh, I think I heard it from like a Bricky video. Isn't it the guy who was basically writing and made Ultramarines ultra OP.
Did with the Necrons and specifically Trazyn is kind of remarkable. So thank you for giving us such an awesome character. But what do you guys think? Is Trazyn the best character in all of 40k, or is there somebody that you think is a lot cooler? What's an underrated character that you think I should make a video on?
Lorgan.
And what do you think about that whole Fulgrim thing? Do you think we're actually gonna get a loyalist Fulgrim, or do you think that plotline is kind of dead in the water? Thanks.
Nah, dude, the Fulgrim idea would be insane. That would be actually crazy.
To everybody who watched this video all the way through, it really helps my channel out and it means the world to me. And if you like content like this, go ahead and like and subscribe. And hit the bell if you want to be notified when I post another video. Big thank you to all my patrons that support my channel and make all of this possible. And with all that out of the way, I'll catch y'all in the next one.
But
Every single
okay, we'll stop here. Great video, very informative. Trazyn, cool guy. This may come as a shocker to you. If I still hold Warger as my second favorite. First one is Sanguinius, we all know that. Second Warger, and I think now Trazyn is kind of making his way there. I need a little bit time to like reprocess everything I was told. Such an interesting character, so different from like everyone else. The museum, again, I guess the writer Matt Walsh is so, that's like the fact that he came up with such cool ideas is insane. As even WesHammer said, when I started, you know, playing Dawn of War games, like I think my uncle gifted me like the game. And when I first saw Necrons, I just thought they were space zombies, basically. You know? So I always knew them as space zombies, basically. But now as I get deeper into the war and learn more about Warhammer, it's just insane. As always, guys, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this reaction. It would really help a lot if you would guys hit like button, maybe even comment, give me suggestions on or what you would want to see, what would you want for me to react next. I'm all ears. And on this note, ciao cacao.